What's up? This is EJ Stewart. All you are your words. If there's anything you learned about me, I'm gonna keep it 100 with you. Well, how the turntables have. Rest in peace to all my ops. This crap is crap.
Let's go!
Let's go is right. What's up? This is EJ Stewart. You are watching 40 Days and Counting, where I do 2 live streaming shows per week. One 6 p.m. Tuesday, this edition Friday 8 a.m. A little later today, but we're rolling. We're back. We're gonna have a fun show because we're gonna be talking some college football. SEC Media Day was this week, so we've seen several conversations regarding several important figures in college football. We're going to talk about it all. We're going to talk about LSU head coach Lane Kiffin, who spoke about regrets he has about how he left Ole Miss, plus what you can expect from his tenure at LSU. We will also talk about Arch Manning, who his head coach Steve Sarkisian, his star teammate Colin Simmons, saying that we could be seeing a new side and a quote-unquote dangerous player in Arch Manning in this upcoming 2026 college football season, so plenty to talk about with that. Also want to discuss what's going on with the New York Mets and the murky future of one of their star pitchers, Clay Holmes. Will he be back in blue and orange next season? Is an extension possible prior to the trade deadline? We have the latest on that. Also, we have a new cover athlete for NBA 2K27, and it may not come as a surprise that Victor Wembanyama was chosen, but given recent history and recent precedent, it is a little bit of a surprise. So we'll get into that as well. We'll also talk about the latest from the Insomniac video game Wolverine for PS5. We got a new trailer. We got some now confirmed details about this game. And I gotta be honest, gameplay still looks fire. I want to play the game, but I'm having problems with the story. And we're going to discuss everything happening in the story. Because, again, we got those confirmed details as San Diego Comic-Con kicks off this weekend. So this is going to be a fun show. 40 Days and Counting, streaming live multiple spots, including streaming live on YouTube. Of course, check out the YouTube channel. New Generation Media is where you'll find us streaming live. Also, streaming live on Instagram. Shout out to the folks on Instagram. Follow me, Action EJ, if you want to watch the show on Instagram. Shout out to Mass1505 who's watching on Instagram right now. Appreciate you. Also streaming live on Buzzer. Sign up for Buzzer if you have not already. Go to bzzr.com or download the Buzzer mobile app, or do both. Sign up via buzzer.com and also download the app, because why wouldn't you want to have the app, right? We're streaming live. And we're going places, so make sure you shout out Buzzer. Make sure you sign up. No X today because X is being annoying as it always is. Though we got past this after what happened Tuesday when it seemed to go fine. Today not so fine. So no X today, but make sure you follow me on X. EJ_Stewart is where you'll find me on X. Let's get the ball rolling, man. Let's talk about what's going on in the Dirty South. That is the SEC, and let's begin with LSU. So Lane Kiffin spoke to the media for the first time in a little while in terms of a major platform, because of course this has been SEC Media Day this week, because there's a million teams in the SEC. It can't be on just one day, so you gotta cycle through various different squads. That's why earlier in the week I mentioned the comments made by Kirby Smart. We've had several different teams. Ole Miss was a couple days ago. We'll actually have a little bit of a quote from Pete Golding, their new head coach, in this segment as well. But Texas and LSU had their day on Thursday, and we're going to talk first about Lane Kiffin and various different interesting comments that came out of Lane Kiffin for what he is looking forward to when it comes to this upcoming season at Ole Miss. But he also was reflective in looking back, and he spoke to ESPN about what was the messy breakup that happened at Ole Miss. Lane Kiffin was the head coach of Ole Miss. He was their most successful head coach in school history. Last year, they were 11-1. They made it to the college football playoff. and they were, by all accounts, one of many teams that were definitely in the mix to potentially win a national championship, which is why the whole LSU saga was so weird and so uncomfortable for folks, because you had a coach who was competing with a team that could have competed with anybody on the national scale, and yet he was fully enthralled in a coaching search. By the way, multiple schools. It wasn't just LSU. Remember, Florida was also hot after him too, but until they kind of realized they were out of it. But he was fully enthralled as part of a coaching search that LSU was making after they fired Brian Kelly. And he eventually made that decision after the Egg Bowl, when they beat Mississippi State to complete their regular season, to move on and to see if he could make something happen at LSU. Now, Lane Kiffin spoke about this in various different terms. But one of them I thought was interesting was when he talked about how he left LSU and how he sees now that perhaps what he was trying to accomplish on his way out probably wasn't the best move. So if you'll remember, Lane Kiffin, after a long process, a couple days after the game, decides that, I'm going to go to LSU. He had that interview with Marty Smith on the airport tarmac, which was kind of weird. It looked like a guy that was trying to skate town. It looked like a guy who had the RICO case coming, and this is his last words before he leaves the country. That essentially was Lane Kiffin trying to get the hell out of Oxford, Mississippi, after he became public enemy number one for leaving the rebels high and dry. And he tried to make various different points about why he ended up leaving, but he ended up also discussing the fact that while he was leaving for LSU to coach next season, he had thoughts and hopes to actually still coach the Rebels in the college football playoff. And this was a pretty debated topic. I mean, there were people on both sides who actually saw some kind of way that this could have worked, maybe. And a lot of his offensive staff had been basically doing playing both ways, so to speak. Like, they would spend part of the week at LSU getting everything ready for next season, and then the second half of the week they'd be preparing for their playoff game that week. Lane Kiffin essentially wanted to be a part of that process. He wanted to try to do both. The Ole Miss president and the AD said, that ain't happening, buddy. Well, nobody wants you here. And Lane Kiffin fought, and he kind of dragged the AD under the mud and dragged the president under the mud, basically saying that, I want to give this team an opportunity to do something special, and I'm being sidelined inappropriately by bureaucrats. That didn't go over well with, obviously, some people at Ole Miss. Some people at Ole Miss thought he should have just coached, but a lot of people didn't want anything to do with him, and now Lane is saying that he regrets how he approached that. Here was a quote here from ESPN. I'll pull it up here. And he said, as you can read, if you can there, yes, I do. When asked, does he regret how that whole thing went down? Yes, I do. But I think that's a good thing that I look at life now. Instead of saying, no, I don't, I was right, I look at things now like, how could I have done them better? But it's also easier when you're farther removed and there's no emotion. Here is also Lane Kiffin also describing that whole situation. He said, I wish I would have went to Keith. I believe Keith is the AD, if I remember correctly. AD or president. He's one of the people at Ole Miss, one of the administrators. He said, I wish I would have gone in when I met with Keith and said, I've made the decision to go. I wish I would have said, hey, I'd like to coach the team. And he'd say, no. And I'd say, oh, hey, okay, I appreciate that. I wish I'd moved on and never discussed it again. But instead, like I mentioned, he kind of persisted. He used social media. We'll get into him not being on social media anymore in a second. He kind of used his influence and his words to kind of try to make it seem like Ole Miss the bad guys in this situation where he was the one that was actually leaving. He then said he spoke to a motivational speaker, and he essentially said that the motivational speaker told, hey, this is basically like, if you were getting a divorce, saying, hey, I'm leaving, and I'm going to go, hang out and marry this woman that you hate. But, oh, by the way, can I come back and stay a couple of weeks and hang out with the kids? And some of those kids I'll actually bring with my new woman. He was like, I kind of realized when he put it that way that what I was doing was impossible. And then he used the words, what I was trying to do was the impossible. So I think this was much better perspective. I thought it was ridiculous what he was trying to do when it happened. I'm like, you can't you can't coach Ole Miss to a national championship while you're becoming a new coach at LSU. It just was, to me, completely implausible. It doesn't make sense from LSU standpoint. Why would I want Lane Kiffin to win a championship for one of our rivals after we just hired him? Don't you want to be here? You left that place because you said we were better. Now you're going to try to strengthen that place. If you go win a national title, that puts Ole Miss on a whole nother platform. That doesn't help our case at all. I know you're the coach, so maybe you can say, well, I'm bringing all my aura and stuff, but you would have given Ole Miss money, resources, all different kinds of platforms that they would not have been, privy to maybe if you didn't coach. It doesn't make sense to do that. So it made no sense from the LSU standpoint. I thought that got understated, this idea that LSU would be cool with that. Why the hell would LSU be cool with that? And then from the Ole Miss standpoint, again, maybe you could argue this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. You have a chance to win a national title, and you should be able to push through. But for LSU, they're looking at the future, and they have the next season and the seasons beyond that. They have more than just that one fixed point in their time as they're moving through as a college football program. So I say all that to say, Lane Kiffin's gonna hang around and love up on your players and talk about how things are great, and maybe try to push them to come over to Baton Rouge right along as the season's over. Maybe he'll push them guys, maybe even shut it down early so they can get to Baton Rouge early. Like that doesn't help them either. Maybe they have an opportunity to win a championship, but to be honest, with all the distractions he had already brought on because he had decided to go through this coaching search, I don't know how privy that team was to winning a national title. So I just didn't get it. I didn't get it from any standpoint. Lane says he now sees the error of his ways. I also want to play some of these quotes as well from SEC Media Day, because he spoke about it further, because he also, on his way out, again, this was a messy situation. Among the things he mentioned when trying to talk about why he left LSU, he mentioned LSU having a lack of diversity. Ole Miss, having a lack of diversity. And he made comments in a Vanity Fair article where he said something along the lines of, when I was recruiting high school players, there were some kids that were like, hey, listen, we love your coaching staff, we love what you got at Ole Miss, but like my grandparents would never let me travel, live in Oxford, Mississippi. That was his quote almost directly, what he said in the Vanity article, and that he said, Baton Rouge, he doesn't have that same problem because Baton Rouge has more diversity. If you look from a factual standpoint, there are more black people in Baton Rouge than there are in Oxford, Mississippi. Now, Mississippi is hella black. I know there's obviously a lot of racial issues and racial history related to a lot of these major places in the South. But of course, Mississippi has a lot as well, and it's kind of become infamous when it comes to that. But the term diversity pissed off a lot of people at Ole Miss. Because a lot of folks want to be removed from maybe some of the ugly past in Jim Crow era, slavery era, and such. Also, because again, Mississippi does have a lot of black people, even if Oxford is a more whiter area. So Lane Kiffin also spoke about that, and he made this very weird analogy that I didn't quite get what he was trying to say, but I'm gonna let you guys hear it and see if you guys got it. Actually, sorry.
We're all going to die.
Sorry, let me play that one more time because I didn't hear my headphones. Let me play it out again.
I watched the Hulk Hogan special, and I realized, and I was like, we're all going to die. And so some of the things that we put importance on, we worry about, and what this person says and that, like, really aren't going to matter. And when I lost my dad, I started thinking that, and I really started thinking, when I grew up, there were two people that I thought just wouldn't die. My dad and Hulk Hogan. And then I watched that special and realized, like, Hulk Hogan died too. Like, there's no way Hulk Hogan was ever going to not wrestle and die. And he did.
No idea what he's talking about. I'm sorry. No idea. And I'm telling you, like, to be honest, to be fair, the question was kind of weird. The guy who was asking the question, or the person that was asking the question, kind of went on a roundabout way to get to, like, how do you feel about those comments you made about diversity? And he went on about this thing regarding Hulk Hogan and how, some things just die, and I never expected my dad and Hulk Hogan to ever die. I think what he was trying to connect was that some things come to an end, even things that seem to be going great and that will never end because of how well things are going. Obviously, his dad, Monte Kiffin, all-time great defensive coordinator. Hulk Hogan, complicated but all-time great wrestler. These are folks in his life he said were superheroes essentially, and I think he was trying to make the reference that things had to end, and and just like those folks died, like this image I created at Ole Miss and what we established at Ole Miss, that also was going to have to die too. And maybe he was having trouble with that. He was trying to find roundabout ways to talk around it. And he then later, in that same quote, literally this is right after he said that, explained that he feels like his comments about diversity were wrong.
So it just made me reflect really on, like, I can't be so concerned about little things and what people say and this. And you got to make decisions. You got to go with them. And you do things and you make really good decisions and you make poor decisions. And that was a poor usage of a term that I believe, just like many coaches that have been there for, was factual, but over the course of a long interview was bad timing and bad usage of the word. So it is what it is. I apologize when I said it, and moving on.
I mean, honestly, that's probably the best way to move about it. Again, I think Lane was having trouble during that time because he had created quite a face turn for himself. Like, if you remember the Lane Kiffin, I mean, you don't got to go back that far, but if I want to go back that far, all the way to, the Raider days and how him and Al Davis were butting heads and how that became this explosive situation. And Lane, as we know, is never afraid to back down from a fight. And Al Davis, I mean, come on. What more do I have to say? So that went poorly. And then how he came into the SEC at his first go around at Tennessee, basically calling out everybody, saying, I'm coming for everybody. I'm coming for you, Nick Saban. I'm coming for you, Urban Meyer, talking crazy. And 1 year, 7 wins, and then he's gone. He leaves immediately to go to USC, and then how he handled the USC job and handled the LA media. And it's just, this is somebody who was seen as kind of like a college football villain, and he had to kind of rehab his image. He went to the school for gifted young coordinators that I call Nick Saban University, Alabama, where he brings in all these assistants who have potential, but perhaps maybe had some trouble, and rehabs their image. And he went there and he did a great job as OC, turned around their offense that kind of was a little bit stuck in the mud, became like this explosive offense where you were seeing people scoring left and right. Lane Kiffin was, of course, calling the plays during that time and rehabbed his image, ended up going to Florida Atlantic, and then went to Ole Miss and became a folk hero at Ole Miss because of how much winning they were doing. They weren't winning national championships, but for a school that always seemed like they had really no shot at consistently competing in the SEC, Ole Miss became a power in the SEC. So I think for him to see that all just go away like that overnight, I think was hard. Regardless of how he was going to be received in Baton Rouge, where he was brought in with the hero's welcome, I think the fact that the national conversation and the conversation back in Oxford and back in Mississippi, where he had made so many relationships and made so many bonds, the fact that had gone so south because he made the decision, I think he couldn't handle it, which is why he started making all these comments trying to explain why he should still coach, explain why he left. It's like, well, y'all ain't got enough black people. Like, he was trying to do everything just to try to make people understand, as he said finally at the end there. And there was nothing to understand. Those people were never going to understand. And into their right to never understand. Like, they love the Rebels. They love Ole Miss. And for people who love college football, watching from a distance, they're never going to understand the idea that you had a chance to win a national championship and you foregoed that for the opportunity to coach at a rival school. That's just some things that people won't get. Some people will be totally fine with that. Some people will be like, hey, like, it's his life. And there were people who certainly did that. But not everyone is going to be in line with that. And I think he's realizes that now. I'm very curious about just what we can expect from Lane Kiffin in his first year at LSU. We got PD Pyatt 6909 saying, "Go Tigers, CFP bound." Listen, they better get to the CFP. I'm being real. Like, I know this is Lane Kiffin's first year, but like everything with Lane Kiffin, everything is loud. Everything comes in with a lot of attention, even when he's trying to like somehow make it not so much about himself and not so much about attention. That's just the way things go with him. And they just fired a coach who won a Heisman Trophy, had some successful seasons, but not successful enough and not consistent enough to keep his job in Brian Kelly. I mean, we've seen LSU. They might have jumped some of the highest, top college football institutions as maybe the most pressure-packed job in America. Because when you think about what Brian Kelly did, and I'm not saying he was some great coach, and I am certainly not a Brian Kelly fan as a football coach. But, I mean, this is not somebody who was some absolute bum as the head coach at LSU. He was okay. And he had some high-end recruits. Again, he had a Heisman Trophy winner in Jaden Daniels, and that wasn't enough. This is a guy that won 10 games in his first 2 years, then 9 games the year before, and a 5-3 start got him out of there. That was it. It was over. And his career winning percentage at LSU was 70%. To be honest, that's kind of what Lane Kiffin was doing every year at Ole Miss, winning about 10 games. Last year was the year when they really reached a level that they hadn't seen in their history. But pretty much that was the Lane Kiffin run at LSU. Was 9 to 10 games, 70% winning percentage. You can't beat the top teams, but you could have some good offenses, some good players, and get some guys in the NFL. That was what Lane Kiffin. That's what Brian Kelly was doing at LSU, and that wasn't enough. So I think that this is a situation where Lane Kiffin better get them to the college football playoff. These people aren't going to be patient. This university, this community is not going to be patient. They had somebody that was okay and had somebody who was able to keep LSU relevant. It wasn't like LSU became Florida. Like Florida became irrelevant. They were a team that was competing for 7-6 wins, competing for bowl eligibility. Like they fell completely off the map. That's not really what happened at LSU. In fact, Brian Kelly was actually a step up from the end of the Ed Orgeron era. So I think that PD they better get to the college football playoff. I don't think there's anything that will be settled for anything less. The problem with Brian Kelly was, despite the decent years he was putting together, they did not make the college football playoff. They couldn't make it when it was 4 teams. They couldn't make it when they got expanded, and that was all that she wrote. He was done. And I think Lane Kiffin, he doesn't make it within the first 2 years. There's going to be a ton of pressure on him, and mainly because of this. I want you guys to hear this quote from Lane, because he talked about something that, when we think about this decision he made as to why he decided to leave Ole Miss for LSU, a lot of it came down to what I think a lot of people within college football know is LSU resources is just different, man. Like, he kind of built Ole Miss into something that they hadn't been. He got a lot of resources to a school that didn't spend like that in the past. He brought a swagger, an aura, an energy around the school that the school never had. So maybe from a distance, you look at this and say, I mean, he made Ole Miss pretty lit. Why would you leave? But he says he's heard this quote from somebody else. I don't know who said it, but he wanted to repeat it. And he said, listen, when you think about the kind of players we can get at LSU compared to Ole Miss, to be honest, it's kind of a no-brainer.
You know, when you talk about the changes of places, somebody said it the other day. They said, like a month ago or whatever, they were like, well, he's been here 6 months and he's had more 5-star signees and commits than he did in the previous 6 years combined. You know, that's kind of proof to me of the decision and of the combination of the two, us and LSU.
And it's not wrong. I mean, LSU's killing it on the recruiting trail. They killed it in the transfer portal, which is why, once again, I'm saying he better make the college football playoff. Because at Ole Miss, let's be clear, at Ole Miss, he recruited well. He recruited better than any coach that ever did. But was he getting all these 5-stars, all these top 2 or 3 guys, top 5 guys? No, he wasn't getting that. He was getting a lot of 4-stars, maybe some low-end 5-stars. He was still getting some studs in there, but it was not the same. At LSU, it's one of those places that kind of like almost runs itself in a weird way. Like the money, the resources, the atmosphere, location. Kids don't want to play at LSU. The recruiting, the firm recruiting round. I mean, Louisiana football is legit. And then you're right next to Texas, so you can go and sneak some of those guys in there if you're talking about a regional thing being a factor in some recruiting battles. I mean, LSU has it all. I think if it wasn't for the NFL, Nick Saban may have never left there. So, like, that's the reality. That, like, the kids that grow up in Louisiana want to play at LSU, who would never look at Ole Miss or don't care about Ole Miss or hate Ole Miss because that's the rival. There might not be enough money to ever recruit those kids, because why wouldn't they stay home when LSU can give them just as much and probably more? So with those resources and with that ability to bring in players comes, again, outsized expectations that I'm very curious to see if he can live up to. Because I feel like Lane Kiffin has kind of gone through, his career is so interesting. He's kind of gone through, in front of our eyes, like a very public, kind of like trial by fire for a college football coach. Like, we've seen this guy thrown into the fire at like 32 years old as an NFL head coach at a disastrous organization. And then what happens when that doesn't go well and you get fired, or yeah, he actually did get fired. But then you land at Tennessee and trying to rebuild something that was kind of broken, and then you quit on a bunch of people. Like, we've seen this guy in very high profile spots fail, but then also we've seen him rise up. And again, his career got basically rehabbed to become a person that LSU would want to hire, and almost everybody would have co-signed him going there. Let's see if he can actually win those big ones. That was one of the issues that he had at Ole Miss, is that when it came down to the biggest games and the best opponents, he struggled in those games. He struggled to beat Alabama. They finally clipped Georgia in the second to last year there, but they lost to Georgia again last year. When it came to beating the top dogs, he couldn't do it. And I think deep down, that was also part of the reason why he left to go to LSU, because LSU has the resources, the money, and he thinks the players that can get him to that point. We're now going to know what kind of coach Lane Kiffin is. I think we all know he's good. Is he great? That's the question that I'm going to have. That requires me seeing how he, comports himself in high pressure, tough environments and close games. Because LSU's going to have a target on their back, man. Like, everyone now knows everything about the Lane Kiffin situation. Again, they're very loud out there on the recruiting trail. So this is a place that they're trying to make it a place to be. I'm fascinated to see how Lane Kiffin approaches this first year at LSU. And finally, last thing I wanted to play for you guys was Lane. One of the things he mentioned, and I think was quite interesting, is that he's off social media. He said it was a challenge by one of his kids to get off social media and delete all his apps. And if you know Lane Kiffin, this is somebody who's very social media conscious. Unlike most college football coaches that really don't dabble in social media, especially high-profile ones, he was not that. In fact, it was very much a part of his public persona. So hearing that he deleted his social media was interesting. He explained this analogy on ESPN, speaking on a panel that included Nick Saban, about how he's realizing that Saban's influence is rubbing off on him in ways that he doesn't even realize, including his idea to get off of social media.
Like in parenting, you don't understand your dad at the time. And then later on you come back and go, man, he was onto something. I say this in coaching. A lot of times now I find myself doing something. And whenever like Charlie Weiss, who was there with the coach, is like, man, you sound like Coach. I was like, oh. And I was like, now that I've done it long enough, I basically realized that Coach had it all figured out. It's why he's the greatest of all time in all the national championships. He wasted no time, on social media. So now I'm sitting here trying to preach, but man, if you get off social media, you'll be so much more focused. You'll be a better coach. You'll be present. He's probably sitting back there like, hey, no shit, Lane. I was trying to tell you that.
10 years ago.
Yeah, like a dad does. Yeah. Like I do now with my son.
Exactly right.
Pretty funny moment there. Nick Saban's, by the way, he's on that panel, so he's sitting there laughing, hearing Lane tell this story about how he got to this, and he's like, yeah, this is something that Nick Saban told me a million times, years and years and years ago. I didn't understand it, but now as I get older, I'm realizing it. And listen, I'm sure he's someone that also probably got a ton of hate, gets a ton of people coming after him, and a place that probably was a good place for him and a safe place for him for the most part, outside of maybe a rival school yelling at him every now and then, probably didn't become much fun after what happened with him in Ole Miss. So I'm sure there was some kind of self-preservation that also came into the decision. But this has also been a thing that Lane Kiffin has done successfully in terms of when it comes to rehabbing his image, is trying to present himself as somebody who has come to a understanding about himself and has matured. And he's talked about, I don't drink alcohol anymore. I don't eat red meat anymore. I'm doing different things. I'm living a healthier lifestyle. obviously he's had some issues in his personal life, and he talked about trying to be better in a lot of different ways. And I think it's been. First of all, I don't want to deny that any things are happening. Like, he does look great, by the way, in terms of just like his fitness, whatever. If he's dieting and stuff, it looks like he looks good. But in terms of all this stuff about him maturing, he could. There's no reason to believe he did not. But again, going back to the Ole Miss stuff, I wonder if so much of this, again, image rehab that may have been legitimate, but also I think was part cosmetic too. I wonder if some of that all bruised him a little bit when everything went to crap once he left for LSU and everybody started bashing him again. So now he's saying I'm on social media. It's just the next Lane Kiffin maturing thing, or is this him actually realizing that the social media thing isn't great? I'll be honest. I thought the Lane Kiffin aspect of him being on social media actually was kind of part of fun of his character. I think it probably actually made players want to play for him. I think it was a part of him that I thought he used very well and was pretty smart. I think maybe earlier in his career he was a little more reckless. I think last few years in Ole Miss, I think he tended to use it a lot more sparingly, but I think in kind of smart ways to kind of show how he can relate to players. But again, this is now Lane Kiffin 3.0, 4.0 version, and this one is gonna be off social media. Let's see how long he's gonna be off this. I thought this one last thing was interesting as we get ready to move on, and we think about his old place, Ole Miss, and Lane Kiffin got a ton of guys from Ole Miss to leave to go to LSU, but not everybody. He couldn't get Kaiwan Lacey, the star running back, and he could not get Trinidad Chambliss, the star quarterback, to get into the transfer portal. You may ask why that was. Now, I'm sure LSU, all the money that Ole Miss couldn't give to Lane Kiffin because he decided to move on. I'm sure some of that money at least went to those guys because if they're going to have any chance this season, they're going to need Trinidad Chambliss and Lacey. Pete Golding, who is the new head coach at Ole Miss, he was the interim coach during the college football playoff. I think he was the name. To be fair, he was not interim. Actually, my mistake. He came in and he was automatically the permanent coach. Like, they hired him as soon as Lane Kiffin left. And he was asked about what was that re-recruiting process like trying to bring Lacey and Chambliss back. Here is what he said about that. And I found this quote very interesting. He said, he told both players, just Google Lane Kiffin, a dude that they would have built a statue of here 3 days ago. Google his name right now. They wouldn't piss on him if he was on fire, right? And so they're going to do the same thing to y'all too if you do what? Transfer. Listen, I'll be honest. I'm sure the tactic was effective because if you live in that orbit that is Oxford, Mississippi, you're a star player there, see all the craziness happening, you're seeing how your coach that, again, you probably would have ran through a brick wall for, is now become public enemy number one. It's probably crazy to see that. So I'm sure it was effective for them, and giving them a couple M's, I'm sure it was effective too. That kind of scare tactic, though, is a little. It's a reality. It's probably the truth. Some of that is kind of off-putting to me. Like, these are young men. I won't say they're kids. They are young men, and now they're getting paid, so they're definitely young men. But they're young men. Is the fear tactic. I don't think Pete Golding meant to be threatening when he told Lacey and Chambliss that, but there was just a tinge of like, hey, we'll come for you guys too if you guys leave. And not we as in Pete Golding, but just the community of Ole Miss. And do you want to be that? No. So make sure you sign here. I feel I would have hoped there could have been a better motivation to keep those guys around. But maybe that was the thing that pushed the envelope. But again, I wanted to bring that quote up again because it just speaks to just how nasty things got for Lane Kiffin at LSU. LSU at Ole Miss. I'm actually curious. I don't think LSU goes to Ole Miss. No, LSU plays Ole Miss at home this year. So we won't get that opportunity to see Lane Kiffin go back to Oxford. But we will quite soon. Not this year. I'm not sure. That, I believe, is a protected rivalry. So if I'm not mistaken, they should play it sometime next year where LSU is going to have to go to Ole Miss. And that's going to be a bonkers scene. Trust me, a year removed is not going to make this any more not salty for the people at Ole Miss unless they win a championship. And even then, I still think people are going to be after them. So LSU travels to Ole Miss. That's going to be on September 19th. Right now, that's slated for a 7:30 start, and I'm sure that's going to stay a night game because you know how. Actually, no, I'm wrong. I'm sorry, I'm wrong. No, Ole Miss, LSU does travel to Ole Miss, so LSU is going to go to Ole Miss this year. Oh my goodness, that's going to be scary. I'll be honest. That's going to be one of those. Set your TV. If you got a DVR, give yourself a reminder. That's going to be a game that you're going to want to make sure that you sit down for. Because it's going to be two very good teams. Like that's a real matchup between two college football playoff contenders for sure. So you're going to watch for that. But also, I mean, they're going to have to put Lane Kiffin in witness protection before the game. And I'm not saying that I am saying it for effect, but I don't say that callously. That's what I mean. Like, I don't want anything to happen. So I'm being serious. Like, that place is going to be very dangerous. So I hope that they take all the precautions they need. The get-in price right now in the secondary market, according to ESPN, for that game, September 19th, $551. That's wild. $551 if you want to see Lane Kiffin return to Ole Miss this upcoming season. That is by far the highest ticket for any game that Ole Miss is going to be playing, both on the road and at home. The next highest price ticket is going to be their home game against Georgia. That's $243. That's the reigning back-to-back SEC champions. And you're going to have to pay more than double to see Lane Kiffin roll into town. That is going to be a crazy, crazy atmosphere when that happens. Keep the college football conversation going. Let's head over to Austin, where a lot of attention on one Arch Manning. One who some will say could be the prospective number one overall pick in the NFL draft coming up in this college football season. Though there's going to be talk about a lot of other star quarterbacks. We're going to talk about Julian Sayin. We could talk about obviously Dante Moore, my guy Darian Mensah. There's going to be a lot of guys that are going to be vying for that spot. But Arch Manning, who foregoed the first NFL last year to come back to Texas for this year, is somebody that's going to have a lot of attention. This is a guy who was a top recruit coming out of high school. He sat behind Quinn Ewers, which was a controversial decision to some for him to continue to remain the backup, even when Texas was not able to reach the heights of winning a national championship with Quinn Ewers at quarterback. He got his opportunity to play last year, and I think he underwhelmed. There were some great moments. There were times in the second half of the season where he played a lot better. But for somebody that was being talked about as being the best SEC player since Tim Tebow, he didn't come close to Tim Tebow-like production. He was good, and again, he had some great games and some great moments, but there wasn't a consistency, and there was certainly some struggles early in the season. When we come to this year, pressure is still there, but I think there's now more of a question mark about exactly what kind of player Arch Manning is. Is he somebody that is this generational player, or is it all hype? Steve Sarkisian was at SEC Media Day and talked about how when we think about that hype that everyone put upon Arch Manning last year, none of that was self-inflicted.
You know, Arch Manning a year ago wasn't on social media or on television saying, I'm going to be the first pick of the draft. He wasn't on television saying, I'm going to win the Heisman Trophy. All he did was work really hard. All he did was try to be the best teammate he can be. And then we had some failures as a team. He didn't play to the way of what he was capable of playing. And then those same people that were saying that about him wanted to criticize and demean him almost for letting them down because he didn't live up to what they thought he was going to be. Very interesting concept right there.
Which, I mean, is not wrong. I mean, they definitely put him on a pedestal. And then as soon as he stopped playing well, a lot of people were like, this guy stinks. I mean, that pretty much is what happened. Now, some of those folks cautioned about that hype and thought maybe it was too much. And some of those folks were the folks that were then saying, hey, like, this guy, y'all told me he was it and he ain't it. So it wasn't all the people that just jumped ship. There's some people that never got on the ship. I was one of them. I said, listen, I want to see him play before you just tell me he's God's gift of football. Like, if he couldn't beat Quinn Ewers out, then that tells me a little bit about where he is. Doesn't mean he can't become a great player. He was young. He was a freshman, a sophomore. Like, you know, he's 19, 20 years old. Maybe he's not ready to play. That happens. But he was gonna go from that to them being the Heisman Trophy winner. Like I wanted to see it, and of course, again, he didn't really come close to any kind of Heisman consideration. But Steve Sarkisian says he feels like Arch Manning went through a trial by fire that a lot of people would have melted by.
The way of what he got put through probably would have melted or destroyed 99% of people in his shoes. All he did was stay consistent to true to who he was, which continue to work hard, continue to be a great teammate, try to get better, and he did. And he came out and played the second half of the season at a really high level. We go 7-1. He's got 20 touchdowns, only 2 turnovers. He's a fantastic player at the end of the year. But he didn't go back on social media and say, I told you so. And all he's done this year is continue to work hard again. And so there's always going to be outside opinions of that guy. And that comes with the territory, and he understands that.
And listen, again, not wrong. I mean, like, I think Arch Manning for sure showed a level of resilience that maybe for some would be expected, but probably shouldn't have been assumed given how poorly he was playing to start the year. Like, he looked like, again, really ragged to me. Like, I thought he looked like somebody that wasn't ready to become a top-notch NFL quarterback, which is what he was being projected to be. I didn't think he looked like a number 1 pick. I didn't think for most of the year he looked like a first-round pick, definitely that first half of the year. And then he turns it around. I mean, 346 yards against Mississippi State, 328 against Vanderbilt. He lost to Georgia. That wasn't a great game, but he did throw for 251. He had 389 yards passing against Arkansas last year in the bowl game, in the Citrus Bowl. 221 yards, 2 touchdowns. He also beat Texas A&M. It wasn't the most efficient game from him, but he did run for 53 yards, and we know he's a good athlete, so he put together some good games. He ran for 155 yards against Michigan. So he showed the athleticism. He showed that he definitely can put up some big numbers. And again, when the schedule got a little lighter, second half of the season, but those are the SEC teams, and you know some of those teams he played are really good, right? Like Vanderbilt was good last year. Georgia is Georgia, and he lost that game. But you know, Texas A&M was the number 3 team in the country when they went and beat Texas A&M at home. So you gotta give him props for overcoming a lot of the noise and a lot of the stuff about what he had gone through and how badly he was playing. And he looked like a different quarterback for a lot of that second half of the season. And Steve Sarkisian, last one here, saying that he feels like what he went through last year is going to make him a different player coming into this year.
I think he learned a lot about himself last year, about dealing with adversity and overcoming. And I think he learned a lot about his teammates and the support that they gave him, and them recognizing the mental and physical toughness that he has to play the position, to be their leader. And I think that he's grown into a great leader for us. And so I'm very proud of Arch for the way he's carried himself, the way he represents the University of Texas. I think right now he's a very dangerous player because he learned a lot from last season, and he's surrounded by some good players. And I think that he's a guy that's poised for a heck of a season.
Dangerous player. That's what Sark says about Arch Manning this year, and that he's showing a lot more leadership, and he's showing a lot more, just a lot more to the team, and the team is following him. This was also Colin Simmons. I want to pull this quote as well, talking about Arch Manning's leadership, and this was what he said. I was trying to find the sound, but I couldn't find it, but I did get the quote here. He said, We need a different side of Arch if we want to get somewhere. So Arch definitely brought that side of him out. I feel like as long as we trust and believe in Arch as a team and never look past him or look down at him, we're going to be okay. So again, a lot of this talk about Arch needing to be this different kind of player. You see that from Simmons. You see that from Sarkisian. Like, even though the praise is high for him, there also is this like little tinge of like he needed some tough love, I think, almost. And that he showed that he could take that and still produce. And there's a lot of hope coming into the season that he could be that. And it got me thinking about Arch Manning. And what made me think about this was because I saw a quote when he was talking. They asked him about like the fact that one of the issues he had was it seemed like he almost had the yips at one point, especially early in the year, where like these short early throws, he was missing by a mile, like throws. And it's scary to make this comparison, but it's true. It kind of reminded me of like Zach Wilson in his first few years at the Jets, where these like layup throws that are like 5 yard, dump offs and check downs or little crossers right in front of him, he's just dirting. You're like, why? How are you missing? Like it's like a shortstop who can't get the ball over to first base. You're like, why can't he make these simple throws? This guy is a Manning. He's been trained in the Manning way of quarterbacking his entire life, and he can't make a 5-yard check down to a running back. What is going on? And for him, they gave him his numbers. I think he had like something along a 54% completion percentage on passes 10 yards or shorter, which is abysmal. I mean, it may sound okay, but it's like that's 10 yards or shorter. Those are again, a lot of times those are check down passes, and that was his percentage. Apparently, he ranked, what I saw, 66th out of 67, I think, FBS Power 5 quarterbacks, starting quarterbacks in those short passes. And Arch had, his quote was, "Yeah, that's not good." Which I found funny to me, because what I think I learned about Arch Manning over the course of last year, and what I'm hearing from someone like me reading between the lines of these quotes from Colin Simmons and from Sarkisian, I think Arch Manning may end up being a lot more like Eli Manning than Peyton Manning. And when I say that is, Peyton Manning, if you ever watched even him at Tennessee, and if you ever watched his interviews, and you watched how he talked, and you watched how he played, he carried himself with a level of confidence. And it's not swagger in the same sense of like a Cam Newton, but there was a swagger to him that was very apparent. This is a guy who clearly saw himself and moved around like he was a pro, even when he was a sophomore at Tennessee. And I've watched, the old clips. I watched the greatest Heisman race ever, a documentary, which is great to see because it's actually, there's no commentary, there's no like interviews. It's just literally one of those docs where you're just seeing how the world was seeing Peyton Manning and all those other guys in that Heisman race with him and Charles Woodson and Randy Moss and Ryan Leaf. And seeing Peyton carrying himself, he looks like he looks younger. He sounds younger, but he seems like very much like the same Peyton Manning I watched quarterbacking for the Indianapolis Colts. How he's answering questions, how he's maneuvering, how he's talking about his expectations. And when I watch Arch Manning, he's not as artful in that. He's not as naturally charismatic, and he's not I won't say naturally charismatic, because that's not what I'm trying to say. He's not naturally, I think, someone who presents himself as an alpha, like Peyton did immediately. He doesn't. So Eli Manning was the same way too. Eli Manning was someone as well who didn't necessarily present himself as an alpha, and it was actually a big reason why a lot of folks didn't want to believe in Eli Manning. People were like, we don't know if he's got the same stuff that Peyton has. And as we've seen, and as we grew to learn about Eli, is that this idea that he was this like soft guy, that like he wasn't anything like his brother, we learned how resilient he was. He was somebody that could have 3 interception games and then turn around next week and beat the Dallas Cowboys on the road in a playoff game. Like he kind of had this unflappable nature to him that actually in some ways made him better equipped to win Super Bowls than his brother. Because in the playoffs, you're going to see all different kinds of things. You're going to have to win all different kinds of ways. You kind of have to let the water roll off your back and just move on. And where Peyton maybe was too wound up because he was such a control freak, Eli is not. And now that we see them as retired players, we've seen their personalities more, we see how much Eli is just like, whatever, man. I like football. I'm good at it. And, everything's not that big a deal. While Peyton is hilarious and Peyton is very charismatic, he's a lot more buttoned up. And I look at Arch and I hear these comments, and then I see Arch, and just when I hear him talk and I see what he went through last year and I see those issues he had, I'm like, I think people are thinking this is the next Peyton Manning, when I think people need to be looking at him as maybe he's the next Eli. If he's the next Eli, he probably should be a top pick, maybe the number 1 overall pick in the draft. The guy is a 2-time Super Bowl MVP. But I say that to say, I don't know if you're going to get this guy who's going to break every single record and play the cleanest football, or be like the cerebral assassin, quote unquote, not to take from Triple H, but the cerebral assassin that Peyton Manning was. I don't know if that's his makeup. It doesn't have to be. I think there's the hope that he could be that way, because Peyton Manning is one of the greatest quarterbacks who ever lived. I always say, damn, I know playoffs matter, and I know he didn't play as well in the playoffs, but you talking about like the art of playing quarterback. I always say I've never seen someone do it like Peyton Manning. Brady was better at winning. There may be some people who threw the ball better, but in terms of just orchestrating an offense and getting your team into exactly what plays you needed, the guy essentially, I know Tom Moore was the OC, the guy essentially called his own plays. He was incredible. And I always got a lot of love for Peyton Manning because I'm like, man, the sheriff was a bad man. Like, again, I know he didn't win win a lot of Super Bowls. I know they came up short a couple of times. But he was him. And I think when we think about Manning, a lot of people in their first mind, they go to Peyton. Like, oh, yeah, this guy, well, of course he's going to be great. Because, like, look at Peyton Manning. And it's like, the more we see from Arch, the more, again, I get Eli vibes than I get Peyton vibes. Which means he may never win a Heisman Trophy. It means he may never lead the SEC. Well, I think Eli actually did lead the SEC in passing yards. But he may never, lead the nation in passing yards. He may never lead the NFL in passing yards and touchdowns. But is he a winner? Is he somebody that can be tough? Is he somebody that can show through a way to overcome adversity, that he can lead through that way? Maybe not so much, hey, I'm just this alpha guy, but I'm somebody who's tough, I'm prepared, and I can see any kind of evil and overcome it because I've been through everything. That was a lot of Eli's career, especially early on, and it's mirroring to me a lot of what I'm seeing from Arch. Eli Manning was someone who also had a ton of pressure, all expectations when he got to Ole Miss, and he was good. And in his last year, he was a Heisman Trophy finalist, but he never became the Heisman Trophy winner. He never became, just this like no doubt prodigy type player, but he was good enough, and because of the name, to be the number one overall pick. Phil Rivers threw for more yards, and Ben Roethlisberger had better physical tools. A lot of people pushed to, well, he's the Manning, and he played the SEC, so we should give him that nod when it came to picking a number one pick. But early in his career, people were like, man, they may have made a mistake. Like, Phil Rivers is making Pro Bowls, and Ben Roethlisberger is going deep into the playoffs, like, and winning Super Bowls. Like, did we screw this thing up? But again, Eli was special in how he was able to see all that and live through all that and still find a way to pierce his own niche into who he was as an NFL quarterback, who he was as a quarterback, and as an athlete, as a competitor. And I'll be curious to see if Arch Manning finds that same niche. I think he will. I think maybe we all kind of got who Arch was wrong. We thought this was Peyton Manning, and maybe he's not. Maybe he's Eli, which means, yeah, he may have some flaws. He may not be the greatest at throwing the ball underneath, but you know what? He's a gamer, and you know what? Things are gonna go poorly, but he'll be able to overcome it. And maybe as he continues to grow as an athlete, as a young man, he'll be able to do what Eli did. Let's see. Again, high praise, high bar still. Even if the Peyton Manning bar is too high, and say let's forget about the Peyton Manning, let's give him the Eli Manning bar. That's still a high bar to clear. Again, the guy was third in the Heisman Trophy his last year at Ole Miss. The guy led the SEC in passing yards. The guy went number one overall. He won 2 Super Bowls and was MVP in those. It's probably going to the Hall of Fame. Still a high bar to clear, but I think that might be the more realistic bar when we talk about Arch Manning. Very fascinating, I thought, just kind of how the folks at Texas are kind of presenting year 2 of Arch Manning as the starting quarterback for the Longhorns. I'm excited to see what they do. I mean, you want to talk about a team that also has a lot of pressure. They got to get to the college football playoff as well. Obviously, they got there the first year of the expanded playoff. This year, there's no excuse, man. They fixed the offensive line issues, they think. They brought in some serious weapons. Cam Coleman, wide receiver. He was at Ole Miss. Now he's at Texas. You want to talk about somebody that is him? This guy is legit. Because Auburn didn't have the sophisticated passing game of some of these other teams, I think, we kind of lose sight of how good Cam Coleman is. But when we were talking about top receivers coming in as freshmen, he was right there with Ryan Coleman-Williams and with Jeremiah Smith as, like, they were basically a kind of a trio of these special, young, true freshman wide receivers and high school seniors who were going to kind of just come in and just dominate college football. And again, he went to Ole Miss, which has not had a ton of success throwing the football. So maybe his numbers don't look that great. Like last year, he caught for 700 yards and 5 touchdowns, which is pretty good. Those are good numbers. But his first year, 598, 8 touchdowns, good numbers. But like say, okay, what's the big deal about this Cam Coleman guy? If everything goes right, Arch Manning has a much better year. He plays more how he played the second half of the year than the first half. Steve Sarkisian is drawing up them plays, and they can protect him. Cam Coleman is the kind of guy that can easily go for 1,200 yards receiving this year and be a guy we're looking at as a top 10 pick in the NFL draft. The guy is 6'3". The guy, I don't know what his 40 time will be if they timed him, but he probably runs something like a low 4.4. He is a freak. And him with the rest of that receiving core that they have, again, the hope is that some of these guys who didn't play as well last year mature and they play much better this year with more familiarity. A lot of these guys aren't going to be thrown into the fire the way they were last season as they were kind of getting their first opportunities. Remember, Texas had all those star wide receivers, including Matthew Golden, who kind of took all the time from a lot of these young guys who were highly recruited but didn't get a chance to play. So now, guys like Ryan Wingo, you come into this year as a former 5-star recruit. Last year, you kind of underwhelmed. You think the natural talent, more familiarity, maybe more comfortability playing in big-time college football, that the recruiting stars start to show themselves. So Texas, they got to get to the college football playoff, man. You got one of the best defensive players in the country. Texas's defense last year, I thought at times was really good. It was their offense that let them down. The expectation is that the offense should have caught up this year to the defense. So if that's the case, and Texas is one of those teams you got to mark down as a you would think a college football playoff lock, which is why once again there's a lot of pressure for them this year. Looking at their schedule, they got another doozy week 2. Last year was week 1. This year they get at least 1 week of a tune-up game before they got Ohio State coming into Austin. Man, that's gonna be. We want to talk about, cinema. Ohio State, after what they did in that first game of the year, basically stifling Texas' entire offense for basically the entire game. Now they come in. They very well could be the number 1 team in America when the season starts. Texas was expected to be a top 5 team as well. That's going to be a high-profile matchup. I think the SEC schedule for them worked out okay as much as it could. I mean, it's the SEC. But, they have Tennessee on the road. They do have Oklahoma. They do have Ole Miss. And they got LSU and then, of course, they A&M at the end. That sounds very hard because it is. But I think given how hard it could be, I think you're saying, okay, well, we are Arkansas, we got Mississippi State, we got Florida in year 1 with Summerall. Like, I think Tennessee, going to Rocky Top, it's a noon game on a Saturday in September. That's always going to be not easy, but it feels like Tennessee's kind of in a weird spot. So I think this is probably the year where Josh Heupel's got a little bit of pressure on him. Probably the year you want to catch Tennessee on the road. I think that the schedule is manageable. Going to Missouri in November is going to be tricky because Missouri is somebody that I think is also a team that's been a little underrated, but has had trouble winning the big game in the SEC since they've joined. So there's some tough ones in there, but there's certainly some winnable games as well. Texas, when it all shakes out, when they start doing these rankings, I'm sure they'll look like the team with one of the toughest schedules because they have the fact that they have the Ohio State game. I thought Sarkisian made a comment that was interesting, where he said, kind of relitigating again the college football playoff thing again, and he was like, listen, last year we played Ohio State, we lost. They were one of the best teams in the country. At the time, they were number 1, and essentially because we lost that game, and then we lost 2 more in the SEC, that took our opportunity to go to the college football playoff. He said, if I scheduled some crumb bum team and we win that crumb bum game and then we lose these 2 SEC games, we're in the college football playoff. So that's just the complications that come with playing the SEC and scheduling tough non-conference. I think this is kind of like a little bit of a, small violin still frustration that some of these SEC coaches have with how their records probably get stacked up against some of these other teams when we talk about college football playoffs and who deserves to get in and who doesn't. What I will say to those coaches, what I say to Steve Sarkisian, is I do think you have to consider, while yes, there is a massive risk of playing an Ohio State early in the season, you do it for multiple reasons. One, you do it to get your team prepared and ready for when you see better competition in a college football playoff. That's a level of adversity that other teams would not have seen. And playing against a team out of conference, not a team you're familiar with. Like, there's reasons, environment you're not familiar with. There's reasons why you do it. So there's that. There's also the plus, which maybe you don't think is a big enough plus. But if you beat, in theory, Ohio State, and you do end up slipping in the regular season, you no longer have this very slippery slope that you have in terms of what you have to do to get in. Like, there's a reality that maybe if they beat Ohio State but lose to another SEC team, then maybe they do get in. Maybe those folks who are making the case for Ohio State versus Miami, that last spot will say, and Notre Dame will say, listen, those teams don't have any win as good as beating the number one team in the country, or at that time number 2 team in the country. I guess they lost to Indiana in the college football in the Big Ten championship game. Nobody has a win as good as beating the number 2 team in the country except for Indiana, and they lost it to 3 SEC teams. One of them was a team that went to the college football playoff. Maybe they lost to another one. Let's say maybe they lose to Ole Miss, something like that. I don't think they played Ole Miss, but you know what I mean. I think they did lose to Georgia. So they lost to Georgia. You lost to Ole Miss. Excuse me. You lost to Georgia. You lost to who else did they lose to? I forgot who else they lost to. Florida was the other game. That was a problem. They lost to this terrible Florida team that got crushed by Miami and crushed by a lot of the other teams in the college football playoffs. So that was their bad look. But there is some. I hate these coaches that keep acting like there's no benefit at all to playing these teams in non-conference when that's not true. There is a benefit. If you beat those teams, now your margin of error in conference play is a lot wider. And also, if you run through conference play, you have now the inside track of being the number 1 team and having, in theory, maybe the easiest pathway. Now, there were some issues with the seedings in recent years as to why maybe that wasn't the case. They've tried to fix that, so now I think it is more likely the case that you have a better chance in terms of what you want in terms of seeding. So I don't like that they say that there's no benefit to this, but I think this thing that I keep hearing these SEC coaches talk about that's starting to get annoying. This idea that somehow like their losses shouldn't be as weighted as much as anybody else because they play all these tough teams in their conference. Like, this is what Lane Kiffin said. I think I have this soundbite. Let's see. Here we go. And talking about how the college football playoff coming into this year, they need to have a better sense of what records look like compared to strength of schedule, and how there needs to be an evolution in that. Here's Lane Kiffin, again, the coach of LSU, talking about something that Steve Sarkisian mentioned when he talked about the fact that Texas, at the end of the day, was out essentially because they lost to the number 2 team in the country in non-conference.
I just think that it's going to cause issues that we've already seen until we can get into a world where people can actually look at teams and say, that team that is 9-3 with their schedule is a better team than that 11-1 in a different conference, which now I think we aren't even close to doing that. I think it causes a problem.
I hate this, man. I hate this because this is this hypothetical football crap that just seems to be exclusive only to the SEC when we talk about these teams. This idea that the schedule is so hard in the SEC that 3 losses here is, in Lane Kiffin's words, equal to maybe even superior to a team that loses only 1 game in another conference. Now, he didn't name the other conference, so we will never know. But again, the SEC, for a conference that has not won the national title in now 4 years. You had 3 years in a row where you had the Big Ten champion win the national championship. You had 3 years in a row where the SEC does not even make the college football playoff championship, where in theory all of these teams, a couple of these matchups maybe are rematches. We saw Georgia play Ole Miss. We saw Oklahoma play Alabama last year in the first round. But teams have an opportunity to, against other opponents, show their strength and show how much better the conference is. Like, Miami is one of these teams that had 2 losses that, in theory, like they say, well, it's not as good because you lost 2 games in the SEC and maybe we're better, right? Well, Miami got to play the SEC and they won every game against the SEC last year. They destroyed a Florida team that Texas lost to. They beat Texas A&M. On the road. They beat Ole Miss. Like those are all SEC teams. Like they were 4-0 last year against the SEC. So, or 4-0 against 3-0 against the SEC, and then Lane Kiffin, and then as Brett Murphy mentioned, this team, the Sarkisian complained about this Ohio State game. Well, Miami beat Ohio State. But if we do the hypothetical football thing, where it's like, well, this team has 2 losses in the ACC, so therefore they shouldn't be viewed better because the SEC is better, we would have never gotten the opportunity to see Miami play at the level they were able to play at. Like, clearly they were capable of beating those top teams, capable of being in the SEC. But when you do this game of like, well, it should be about who you play, and because we've already put out there that the SEC is just so much harder than everywhere else, that it's going to just give us an advantage. I don't think that's right, man. Like, I don't think, because it's not applicable. It's not applicable to what we've seen when they've had to play these teams in non-conference. I watched Notre Dame walk down Georgia. I've watched Miami walk down Texas A&M and walk down Ole Miss. Like, I'm seeing the SEC teams getting opportunities to show those results. I saw Alabama get just torched last year by Indiana. Where is the strength from the SEC, and who are they to walk around talking about how our 3 losses is better than your 1 loss? I mean, I just think at a certain point, it's starting to become like the kid that's crying over spilled milk and the dog that, the boy that cried wolf. Like, again, like I said the other day, we don't believe you. We need more. You need more people. I don't see this, just this crazy over the top advantage that is so difficult about SEC schedules that they keep pushing. Because the reality is some of these teams that they're talking about are severely overrated. Yes, they're big brands. Like Oklahoma's a big brand. Tennessee's a big brand. Some of these schools are big brands, but when they've actually had to go out on the football field and play, they haven't been all that. So I'm supposed to value those losses to those teams. Like, I'm supposed to value a loss to Florida. I know I see the gator on the helmet. I see the blue and orange uniforms, but that ain't Urban Meyer, Florida. That's not Steve Spurrier, Florida. I know what I'm watching. You know, I'm not watching Barry Switzer's Alabama. Oklahoma. Oklahoma had a good year last year, but like, I'm not seeing, these aren't the juggernauts of past years that you're talking about. And you know, they keep pushing this agenda that they need to have, you know, preferential treatment because their schedule is so hard, and teams that play in other conferences, like, you just don't understand how much easier it is to win in those conferences. Then why don't you go in those conferences? Like, I'm tired of these coaches complaining about the SEC and how difficult it is, and they're not being given fair assessments in the college football playoff. Then go coach NC State. Go coach at, you know, Purdue. Go coach at Texas A&M, like Texas Tech. I'm sorry, or Colorado. Like, go to these schools where you keep saying how easy it is to win those games. You'll go to the college football playoff, apparently. It's so easy to win 11, 10 games in those conferences. Why are you still choosing to go to a conference where you're saying you're being mistreated? You're going there because you think they have more resources to make you successful. So when I hear these coaches blaming the college football playoff for their lack of success and not their inability to win important games, it just feels like they're trying to pass the buck on to somebody else. They're saying, no, we should be evaluated on a curve when you went to that school because you thought you had better advantage. You thought you had a better chance to win. That's why. Maybe more money was a part of it too. Maybe those schools can pay you more. But then, okay, you're getting paid more. Then call it like it is. Stop giving all this other crap about why the SEC is being persecuted. Come on, you run college football. You're not being persecuted, man. Like, Texas was not that good last year. Like, I watched them play against elite teams. They weren't winning a national championship. They weren't going to a national championship. We watched, again, a lot of these squads have opportunities to show why they were top teams, and they couldn't get it done. Take it as it is. You love the money, you love the resources, you love the access to 5-star recruits. You gotta take the pressure that comes with also competing in those conferences. To want to have all the luxury, but then take away all the pressure, I think is whack. I think it's weak. Shout out to Sark, and shout out to Lane Kiffin, shout out to the SEC. I'll be watching. I love watching me some SEC football, but again, like Keontae Scott from Miami said, now rookie NFL defensive back. Too much talking on the net. Do it on the field. Do it on the grass. That's what we want to see. That's all we want to see. That's all we care about. Looks like, according to reports, as we shift to baseball, looks unlikely that the Mets will be able to reach an extension agreement with Clay Holmes prior to this upcoming trade deadline in early August. Clay Holmes pitched really well in his last rehab start. He's been one of the best starting pitchers the last 2 years. He's been out for so much of this year because he took a line drive to the fibula that broke his fibula, and he had to take some time off. But he is on his way back. Where he will play, though, I guess is a little bit of a question because we don't know if the Mets will consider trading him. We know he's not among those players that's being talked about as being somebody who could potentially be untouchable, right? We saw the report from Chelsea Janes that included Juan Soto, Christian Scott, Nolan McLean, A.J. Ewing, Carson Benj as the folks on the squad who are untouchable. Everyone else can be had, including Francisco Lindor, which we talked about earlier in the week, or last week, I think maybe we talked about it, whenever we talked about it. But Clay Holmes is also that other guy as well, who is a star player on the team, but in theory could be on the block. Again, there was indication that maybe the Mets would be open to signing him to an extension, and Clay Holmes would be open to it, but the recent reporting now is that it appears he is more likely to be traded than he is to be re-signed. Now, I don't know what the return is you're getting for Clay Holmes, and I guess the reality is we have to see how the trade deadline plays out, right? Before you just say, don't do this, don't do that. I don't know what offers the Mets are getting. But to me, if I'm the Mets, unless I am getting like true, tangible prospects that I think could either become major league players or I can certainly use for more capital to make big moves in the offseason, I don't know if I'm risking letting Clay Holmes be traded somewhere else for a couple of reasons. Yes, the Mets have a ton of cash, as they always do. So as long as Steve Cohen's willing to pay the Cohen tax, then the Mets shouldn't have much of an issue in terms of being able to re-sign Clay Holmes if money is going to be the big thing. But I think one of the things that would worry me about trading Clay Holmes is the idea that nothing helps a player grab a bag than great performances in high-profile positions. If Clay Holmes gets traded, he's probably going to be traded to somebody that's a contender, somebody that's going to be competing for a playoff spot, maybe somebody that's firmly in the playoffs, maybe somebody that's competing for a World Series. If your thought process is, we're going to lend him to some other team, but then maybe we can re-sign him on the way back. I didn't play a dangerous game where, number one, maybe he goes to a place where he falls in love or they fall in love with him, where maybe they saw him initially as a rental and then decide, well, you know what, he's so great, maybe we do got to sign this guy and let's give him this bag. And then he says, you know what, I loved it so much here, I won, I was at a place where I was losing all the time, like, I'll just stay here and win. And then you lose your chance of bringing him back. There's also the reality that maybe he does go someplace that's a rental, but again, he pitches well, he pitches in high-profile moments, he pitches in the World Series, something like that, and maybe it's to the Rays or someplace like that. Maybe someplace like the Dodgers or some other high-priced team looks at what Clay Holmes does for a high-profile team or a team that wins a championship or competes for a championship and says, oh, maybe this is somebody that we had questions about and not knowing because he's playing for the lowly Mets that maybe we weren't willing to give a huge bag to. Now that I've seen him pitch in October and pitch at this high level, and that's going to, yesterday's price is not today's price, and maybe I will be able to fork over X amount of money to bring him onto our staff. And now the Mets may be engaging in a bidding war that they didn't expect. That, I think, is a pretty big risk when it comes to potentially losing Clay Holmes, who I don't think is somebody that they should just be willing to just see walk out the door. The Mets, by all accounts, what they're telling us, unless they're lying to us, unless they're lying to the people, but in terms of what they're saying behind sources, the Mets are not being considered as a team that is going to be rebuilding next year. So if that is the case, and the Mets aren't rebuilding, you're going to need some good major league players on the roster next year in order to compete. It's part of the reason why I wouldn't trade Francisco Lindor. I think it's the other reason why I wouldn't trade Clay Holmes. He's your best starting pitcher. Like, right now, he's kind of he may not be an actual number one, but right now, he's your number one guy. Like, Freddie Peralta has been a joke, and Nolan McLean's pitching a lot better this year, but, he kind of had a slow start to the season. Clay Holmes has always been the model of consistency for the most part, and he's had a great start to this season. You trade him, now you have another hole in your rotation. Like, Christian Scott looks good, Zach Thornton looks good, but the Mets, we know, don't have a lot of depth when it comes to their starting pitching staff. I think that, we've seen the end of Sean Mania. I think we've seen the end of Kodai Senga. These guys aren't viable as part of the rotation anymore. You traded David Peterson. There's not some hot shot prospect, that should be guaranteed a spot in the rotation next year. Jonah Tong has struggled in AAA. Why would you move off of a guy who's been one of the better starting pitchers in the National League the last 2 years? If you're trying to win next year. Now, if you're saying you're not, and saying we need to rebuild, we need to get younger, we need to look at the draft, you're talking about those things, then that's a different conversation. If we're talking about we need to still try to win next year, I don't see how you do that with risking Clay Holmes not being back. I know there's a risk in theory of what happened with Edwin Diaz in theory, where he went to free agency and then he left when you thought you had a deal in place and you thought there was no way he would leave. But again, I'd rather take that risk knowing that I can get him back and knowing that, we showing how much we welcome him here. And I try to sign to an extension. Again, I don't know if the numbers are being talked about, but he's pretty durable. He hasn't pitched a ton of innings. So I know he got hit, the freak accident with the fibula. But he's not someone who's logged a ton of innings, so I don't think he's this super health risk. I think the way he kind of pitches also kind of helps in terms of health, right? Like he's a sinker baller. So I think when it comes to issues with Tommy John and stuff, you're not looking at somebody who's throwing 103 miles an hour or something like that. He is a little hard, but not throwing like that. There's reason to believe Clay Holmes has the potential to be a good long-term starter. I don't know if it's worth the juice is worth the squeeze on a trade deadline trade for a guy who hasn't pitched in 2 months. Like, we know how good he is, and I think they may look at saying for these other teams, hey, there's a risk. We haven't seen him pitch in a while. He's in AAA. Like, what exactly are we getting from this guy? Okay, here's our 10th prospect. I'm not taking that. Like, I can live without the 10th prospect from the Tampa Bay Rays. I can live without the 8th prospect from the Phillies or from the Dodgers. I'm not doing that. You tell me you give me your number 2 prospect? Your top prospect? Okay, that's a different conversation because there's a chance that maybe we're getting somebody who could be tangible as a big leaguer or tangible as somebody that we're trading for a star player. Getting like middling prospects, I don't know how much that's going to really move me to figure out what's going to happen, whether or not I should move on or let him walk. So we'll see what ends up happening. Right now, again, it seems like an extension unlikely for Clay Holmes at this point in time. Again, we still got more than a week before the trade deadline, so things can change quickly. I'll be curious to see if the Mets end up doing about face and trying to get a deal done once they kind of start to see what the offers are out there for Clay Holmes. 'Cause I'm not sure if you're getting like a ton. Like I don't see like this crazy haul you're getting for Clay Holmes. He's been very good. He's been very consistent. Again, has he profiled as a number 1 starter? I don't know if he's necessarily been that. Like, you're getting rid of, Tarek Skubal is going to get even though he's a rental, he's going to get a fortune for the Tigers if they trade him, which I think they will. Because the guy's a Cy Young winner. The guy is somebody that we've seen dominate in October. He's somebody that has pitched in those high-profile situations. So teams are going to feel like there's a proof of concept of what you're getting from him and that he could be the finishing piece on a title contender or maybe the finishing piece on a team that wants to make the playoffs. There's a little more, again, proof of concept with Clay Holmes. He's good, but I don't think he's Tarek Skubal. I think that's fair to say. So and that's another situation when the guy's on a rental. So if you're not getting like that kind of package for a team that needs other good player, unless you know Tarek Skubal's coming next year, which you don't know. Again, you knew Aaron Diaz was coming back, and that wasn't the case. So you don't know for sure what's going on. So unless you know that kind of thing, I don't think that you should move in a way that is just so. I don't know. It's just to me, it'd be potentially reckless to let Clay Holmes go out there and maybe ball out for some other team that's compete for a playoff spot and think he's going to come back. It's not that it can't happen, but I think that would be risky. A couple more things, man, before we get out of here. I want to thank you guys so much for checking out this edition of 40 Days and Counting. Again, streaming live, multiple spots. No X today. You can follow me on X, EJ_Stewart, but we're not on X today because X is doing its thing again. So I don't know what's going on. But no X. But make sure you follow me there anyway. Follow me for commentary. Follow me for other content. I'm live on it. I'm not live on X, but typically we like to be. We are live on YouTube. Shout out to the folks in the YouTube chat. Shout out to my guy Rob DeRay. Maybe he's stuck in a time machine, or maybe he's still just celebrating Nixon 5, baby. Yes, it is the Nixon 5. This actually will be a relevant comment in a second. But shout out to Rod Ray, always a loyal viewer. Shout out to the folks in the chat who jumped in. Again, Pete Pyatt 6909 talking about the LSU Tigers. We talked about LSU earlier today. We talked about college football. You're going to start to see the show shift as we get more into the summer. We get more into NFL training camps, which, by the way, kick off basically this week. Like, guys are reporting. I think today is the day where the guys start reporting. The rookies, at very least, start reporting. And by next week, you'll start to have the full teams there and practices going on. So you're going to start to see the shift from off-season NBA, where it's kind of over now, except for LeBron, who's in day, I think, 25 now of Decision 4.0. No real NBA, though we got one more NBA topic here. Not as much baseball, maybe until the trade deadline actually happens, and then we're in the stretch run. But once you get to that point, man, football is in full swing. So you'll start to hear a lot more NFL, college football stuff on 40 Days of Counting, which I'm excited about, because when we started 40 Days of Counting, we got to do a lot of football because it was the playoffs, which is cool. But in the end of the regular season, I guess, for at least the NFL. College football, we were in the college football playoff when this show started, when I did 40 Days and 40 Nights. But this will be the first time I actually really get to do like a full kind of preview heading into the NFL season, the college football season. So it's going to be a lot of fun, things we'll be able to do, topics to talk about. So really excited about that as we gear up for football season. Again, make sure you follow on social media. Make sure you follow on Instagram, Action EJ, where we're streaming live. Make sure you follow me on Buzzer, EJ205 Prep. And when you're watching this video, whether you're watching it on Instagram, whether you like watching it on YouTube, whether you're watching it on Buzzer, do me a favor. Make sure you hit that like button. Hit that like button. Helps with the engagement. Helps with getting other people to see this show. If you're enjoying this show, hit that like button. Jump in the comment section. Let me know what you think about the show. Let me know your thoughts in the world of sports or pop culture, what you got on your mind. And we talk about it on the show. So jump in that comment section. Hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel, New Generation Media on YouTube, and make sure you follow your boy on social media, EJ_Stewart on X, Action EJ on Instagram and TikTok, and EJ205 Prep on Buzzer. I feel like NBA 2K made a mistake. Victor Wembanyama was named the cover athlete for NBA 2K. He's not alone. NBA 2K has now been doing these multiple versions, so there's other cover athletes as well. So Caitlin Clark is, I think, the deluxe version, and Derrick Rose, I think, is the ultimate version. So there's multiple versions of the game, but Victor Wembanyama is going to be on the cover as the main cover athlete for WNBA 2K27. I'm trying to see if I can get you the cover because I realized I didn't bring it in. So let me see if I can download it real quick. But first of all, I think the cover is cool. To be clear, like I think it's a nice cover, but I think they goofed this. I think they made a huge mistake. I think they missed the moment. How in the world is Jalen Brunson not the pick to be the cover athlete of 2K this year? How? Someone explain this to me. How does this make any sense? NBA 2K has been pretty consistent the last few years now with making sure or securing the hero of the NBA playoffs and NBA finals, that person, whoever the hottest storyline was, being the face of the next game. A couple years ago, you had Jason Tatum. Last year, you had Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And then this year, you don't have somebody that won an NBA Finals. You have the guy that lost. And lost in a way that was like, that was rough. It was not like, oh, like he was averaging 40, but, you know, the team against that he was going against was too strong, or he was dominant. He made some clutch shots. He made some big plays, but, you know, came up just short. I mean, the Spurs lost in kind of embarrassing fashion. This is the cover here for NBA 2K. Yeah, I think it's a cool cover. This was after his game winner against Portland in the regular season that clinched a playoff spot for the Spurs. And this is a cool picture. This is him with Dylan Harper and with Devin Vassell, who ironically, I guess, also make the cover. But I just feel like 2K missed the moment. This moment right now is about the New York Knicks in the NBA. This moment right now is about Jalen Brunson. It feels a little tone deaf to push the alien of all years this year as the cover athlete. Victor Wembanyama is the future of the NBA. In many ways, he's the future face of the NBA. There's really no reason not to believe he's not going to be one of the all-time greats. The opportunities for you to strike on the Victor Wembanyama cover feels like, unless there's injury, feels like inevitable and feels infinite. Like, it feels like there's going to be plenty of opportunities where he's going to have huge seasons, maybe win championships, MVPs. Like, there's going to be moments for him to get that notoriety, get that recognition. Why you would pass up on the first Knick captain to lead his team to an NBA championship since Willis Reed, who averaged 30 points in the NBA Finals, who against Victor Wembanyama scored 45 on the road to clinch the team's first title in 53 years, seems like you don't understand the magnitude of what Jalen Brunson did. You don't understand the magnitude of what the Knicks title was. Victor is a great player, and he's always going to be relevant, but it felt like this is almost like a decision they made where they decided it in the conference finals, or they decided it in April. Like, they decided before whatever was going to happen in the regular season that they'd already signed off, and they said Victor Wembanyama's got to be the guy on the cover. See him on the cover now when he kind of became a meme in the NBA Finals. He's pointing at his head, I'm in your head, and you're blowing a 29-point lead. You're blowing these leads left and right. You're saying these crazy comments in the press conferences about how, oh, we're fine, and we're playing, all we got to do is play regular to beat this team, and then you lose. You're putting losers on the cover of NBA 2K27 and not the team, the players that won, and especially when it was a historic win. This is a miss, man. Like, I don't know what they were thinking. Like, the Victor Wembanyama bag for NBA 2K was going to be there for the next 15 years. Like, not to say that Jalen Brunson can't win another title. He certainly can. Not to say that Jalen Brunson isn't going to be viable for more NBA 2K27 covers. He will. He's a superstar player, and he's still in the prime of his career. But this moment in the NBA right now is about the New York Knicks. It's about Jalen Brunson. That is it. It's not about Victor Wembanyama. It's damn sure ain't about no Spurs. This is a layup. They missed the layup. It was like that layup that Dylan Harper missed that was wide open in the NBA Finals, or when Josh Hart missed that wide open layup in Game 4. Like, this was a wide open layup that somehow they smoked. They completely smoked it. It was the easiest decision of all time, and somehow they landed on what I thought was a decision that is just nonsensical. Like, because he's so great, and because he's such an icon, such a phenom in Victor Wembanyama, it's like, I mean, could you go wrong ever putting him on? I mean, maybe not. But, again, this moment hasn't been about Victor Wembanyama for a while now. Like, he, by the way, kind of went from being this guy who was beloved by almost everybody to being a little bit more of a villainous character. All the cocky talk, the dirty plays. This was not the moment to put him on the cover. It just wasn't. It just wasn't. I think 2K made a mistake going with Victor over Brunson. And I'm shocked that they did this. I really was like, they gotta be Jalen. It's gotta be Jalen Brunson. It's not even a conversation. Jalen Brunson had way more of a case to be on the NBA 2K cover than Jason Tatum did a couple years ago. Jason Tatum had a terrible NBA Finals, at least shooting the ball. His team won, but he was so terrible shooting the basketball, and his impact was so muted that Jaylen Brown ended up winning the Finals MVP. And they still put Jason Tatum on the cover. Because, again, like, he's the star. He's the 1A on the Celtics. A lot of people feel like he's the guy they push more as the franchise guy. He's the guy that has more endorsements. He is more famous. So they pushed that, but he won a title. So you couldn't go but so crazy about that. But, again, he couldn't even win Finals MVP in the Finals where, like, it wasn't that hard. You beat the team easily. Nobody on your team. Jaylen Brown had a good Finals. It wasn't like he was averaging 30. Like, Jason Tatum plays normal, to quote Victor Wembanyama. He wins that Finals MVP easily. He didn't because of the pressure and the defense and everything. It was a lot harder to do than what people think. You would think people will have that respect for Jalen Brunson and what he did in the NBA Finals, and 2K didn't show it to him. It's just silly, man. It's just a silly decision. Cool cover though. It can't lie. It's a cool cover. I like the picture. I like the kind of the neon light look on the 2K word. So I like a lot of this cover, but just wrong guy. Like, it's just absolutely wrong guy. They totally screwed that up. putting Victor Wembanyama instead of Jalen Brunson. Give me a break. So shout out to Rob Ray. I said that the Knicks in 5 comment would be relevant, and it was. Last thing, man, before we get out of here. I don't know if I mentioned this on this show, because I do so many damn shows. I don't remember if I mentioned it on this show or if I mentioned it on Hero Talk. It might have been on Hero Talk. I'm pretty sure it was on Hero Talk. But there were some details that leaked about what we could expect from the new Insomniac games release for Wolverine PS5. This is the same company that made the Spider-Man games. You had Spider-Man PS4. You had Spider-Man 2, which is on PS5. You had Spider-Man Miles Morales. All games that were critically acclaimed. All games that were a ton of fun. There's been a lot of hoopla about this Wolverine game they were also making during this time that they had been teasing for a while. And we're in the final stretches. We're months away now from Wolverine PS5 coming out. And people are very excited about it, as they should be. Wolverine is obviously one of the most iconic superhero characters. Insomniac Games has done a great job with their gameplay and crafting stories that have been really, I think, really awesome. So there's a lot of excitement about what to expect from this upcoming Wolverine game. But then we saw the story behind it, and to be honest, now I'm a little concerned. Not a little concerned, I'm actually a lot concerned. I'm actually very frustrated. So there's new footage, new trailer that came out of the game. I'll see if I can actually download some of these pictures. But among the details that we learned about this game is for a world that's going to be centered around mutants, because Wolverine, of course, is a mutant, which means you got to have, mutant characters, people he's interacting with. It's going to be a world that somehow will not include any X-Men at all. As you can see Wolverine there from the trailer. This is going to be a game where Wolverine will exist in a world where X-Men do not exist at all. So if you're somebody who was like, oh, this is going to be cool, there's going to be so many cool X-Men crossovers. Well, think again. Because, again, this is not going to be a game where the X-Men exist. Apparently, according to the folks at San Diego Comic-Con who are covering everything happening over there, so shout out to them. The word from Insomniac is that this world is going to not involve the X-Men. So you don't got to worry about that. Here's another picture of Wolverine. Not as good a shot. Actually, I'll see if I can download a better one. This is a world where the X-Men don't exist. You saw in the gameplay that they showed a couple months ago that Jean Grey exists. But she is somebody that's not a member of the X-Men because, again, they do not exist. But her and Wolverine have a relationship because they are ex-lovers, is what the word's going to be in terms of how they're bringing her into the game. As you can see, another shot of Wolverine versus Sentinels. Bolivar Trask is going to be a factor in this game. There's also details about Lady Deathstrike being the leader of the Hand in this one, as opposed to that's not really her role in this, though. You will get to face the Hand, which was pretty cool in the game. But a lot of details that are going to be very different. Wolverine, Mystique, and Sabretooth from Team X with Nathaniel Essex are there to protect mutants. That's how Wolverine kind of comes into becoming, the Wolverine that we know. Bolivar Trask and Trask Industries are the main villains. Lady Deathstrike also features as the leader of the Hand. I'm sorry, I just this story that they're telling is a no for me. I wish I could be excited about the story, but bringing in Mr. Sinister to work with Mystique and Sabretooth with Wolverine for Team X, that's who we're going with, who's protecting mutants. I'm sure he ends up turning up being villainous or whatever, obviously, because he's working with Sabretooth and Mystique. But that's how you're bringing in Mr. Sinister. The reason why Jean and Wolverine have a relationship because they're former boyfriend and girlfriend. No X-Men involved. The Lady Deathstrike being the Hand thing, I don't mind that. That's kind of cool. But what is this story, man? Like, what are we doing? This is nobody asked for this. Part of me wonders if maybe they didn't get the rights to the X-Men somehow, and so that because they didn't get the rights to the X-Men, they just well, we don't want to just we don't want to do a game and, say we can't do a game because we don't write X-Men. How can we work around this? So they wanted to get creative with the characters. But I'm just tired of this idea that Wolverine, as cool as he is and as great a character as he is, that his value is so high that is independent of anything related to the X-Men. Like, I just feel like there's been this, like, because of the late 90s and early 2000s movies, there's been this, like, rearranging of the relevance to Wolverine's role in the Marvel Universe and its relation to the X-Men. That is where it is most relevant, and that is a part that I don't think you can remove from him. Not to say that he can't have great solo stories. He absolutely does. It's not to say that he can't have, affiliations with other teams. I like that he's been a member of the Avengers. I think it's been cool. But, like, this move to continue to try to separate Wolverine and everything that makes him important and cool from the X-Men, as if the X-Men weren't the most popular comic book series for so many years. Like, I think you see it with what X-Men 97 has done. I think you've seen it with so many of the rumors about what the MCU's X-Men are going to look like. The X-Men just move the needle in a way that very few superhero entities do. And for some reason, like, there was this level of disrespect, or because Hollywood execs in 1999 saw Wolverine as this moneymaker, and, the people who at Fox who saw the X-Men animated series and saw Wolverine as a moneymaker, they seem to, again, want to separate the relevance of the X-Men to that from him, because they think that he really is the driving force when the X-Men were way popular before he even showed up. It's getting annoying. It's getting frustrating. And listen, I'm not someone who's saying that, I want Wolverine in every X-Men project. I'm actually really excited about the idea that he may not be in the first X-Men movie, or at least not be a part of the team in the first X-Men movie, because I think the X-Men don't need him to be relevant and to be interesting. In some ways, Wolverine is one of the most uninteresting elements of the X-Men. In some ways, not always. You got your writers for sure, but I think, to me, the most interesting aspects about the team oftentimes is the Gene Scott dynamic, is Charles Xavier's dynamic with his vision for mutant kind and his disagreement with Magneto. Like, those to me are the most interesting elements of the team and of the stories. Like, it's not Wolverine. Like, Wolverine was kind of a mystery for a lot of his life because he didn't know what his past was. So, I mean, this was something that I saw with a lot of disappointment. Trailer looks good. The art, the face of the model is like whatever, but Insomniac's not the greatest with that. The action looks incredible. We saw that in the gameplay. I'm gonna play it. I'm gonna be having fun with it. But the story, man, I'm like, no X-Men? What? Like, that's a world, an alternate reality where there is no X-Men. It's not a world I really want to live in when I'm following a Wolverine story. Like, I actually did, ironically, read a Wolverine story that has no X-Men. If you read Ultimate X-Men from the new Ultimate series that was launched by Jonathan Hickman and Denise Camp, the Ultimate Wolverine story that is told, obviously, because of that world that's created. It's a long story, but essentially, the X-Men were never built because the Maker, who's an evil version of Reed Richards, goes back in time and changes reality so that heroes never exist and he can run the world. Crazy. But in that world, of course, the X-Men don't exist, and he actually becomes the Winter Soldier, which is quite terrifying if you're somebody who knows the Winter Soldier. As you think Bucky was scary, think about Wolverine being that character. But for the most part, I'm not looking for all my stories to be Wolverine and no X-Men involved or no link to the X-Men. Again, they don't even exist. It just I don't know. It does not move the needle for me in a major way. This was really disappointing. I'll play it. I'll see. Hopefully the story comes along and it's pretty good. I think Insomniac's gotten some bad raps of late from folks who talk about how, like, only the first game was good or had good stories. I mean, I thought Miles Morales was fun. I haven't finished that game, but I've played a lot of it. I thought the Spider-Man 2 story was awesome. I'm sorry. There are people who complained about like that. They didn't like Harry being Venom, but I thought they told a really, really, really good story. And the game was really fun. I had no problem with Spider-Man 2 PS5. So maybe they landed this plane. Maybe it ends up being okay. But I heard the details about this and I hated it. I hated it when I heard it, when it leaked. I hoped it was wrong. I hoped it was bad info. Turns out it's not bad info, and I hate it more. I just don't know Unless there was some rights issues, and maybe we'll learn that. Maybe Insomniac couldn't say the X-Men or have the X-Men. I don't know. I don't know how you have all these X-Men characters and not have the X-Men exist. But maybe there's a reality where they were given a red line about something they couldn't do. To me, if you're doing a Wolverine game and you can't have a world where the X-Men exist, I don't know if I'm doing it for Wolverine game. I'm being honest. And I think that's a good place to leave it, man. I want to thank you guys so much for watching this episode of 40 Days and Counting. This was a fun one. I enjoyed this one. Again, I enjoyed getting back into the football bag a little bit. Of course, if you want to enjoy this content we have, make sure you subscribe to New Generation Media, where we do all of our episodes, obviously at 40 Days and Counting, along with other episodes we have of Hero Talk and all those different podcasts that we do. Hero Talk, Orange and Blue Bloods, all the content you want. Imperial Broadcast. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, New Generation Media. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast channel as well, New Generation Podcast Network. Once again, if you can't watch these episodes, whether you can't watch them live or you can't watch them on YouTube or anywhere else because you realize that you're on the go or you're driving or you're working out, or whatever the case may be, you can listen to episodes of this show. All of the audio versions get podcasted to the New Generation Podcast Network channel. Just search New Generation Podcast Network wherever you get your podcasts, and you can find all episodes of 40 Days and Counting. So once again, make sure you go to the New Generation Podcast Network to find that. Also, be sure to, once again, when you're on YouTube or watching on Instagram or watching on X for the few minutes you could, make sure you like this video. Make sure you comment in the comment section. And once again, of course, subscribe to the YouTube channel, New Generation Media. Subscribe to the podcast channel, New Generation Podcast Network. And be sure to also, if you can, on the podcast channel, 5-star review always helps. Hitting the auto download feature also helps. All those things help the channel. So again, we greatly would appreciate that. That's going to do it. 40 Days and Counting. Programming note, I will be live on WFAN Saturday night, 9 p.m. to 1 a.m. So late, but not overnight. So you should be able to listen if you're someone who's an early bird. Make sure you check out the show, 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. That will be live on WFAN. You can find us on the Odyssey app or 101.9 FM. Have a great weekend. We'll see what we get into next week, man. Next week, we'll have a Tuesday show. There won't be a Friday show because I'm going on my honeymoon. So that'll be a lot of fun. But I'll see you next Tuesday. I'll see you on Friday Night in the Fan, Saturday Night in the Fan. I'm EJ Stewart. Have a great weekend.